too. Yeah.
All right, well then, welcome everyone. I'd like to introduce Steve Finkelstein. He is going to talk with you about leveraging onboarding best practices to increase employee engagement. I've seen Steve speak before, and he is not only very knowledgeable on the topic, but he's also a very engaging speaker, so I think you'll really enjoy his presentation. So, Steve?
Well, thanks. Thanks for coming, everybody. In the next 5 hours, the next 25 minutes, we're going to talk about best practices in onboarding and how we can enrich employee engagement. So, my objective today is to make advocates for onboarding, that you spend the time and the energy and the resources to do it right. So at the end, I'm going to have you raise your hands. Anyone watch Wheel of Fortune? Ready? Vanna, come on. I'm sorry. Let's go. You have to guess this. It always gets like a quiet lull in the audience.
Okay. Can experience on the van answer or bar?
Your bar. Come on. Quiet, quiet. Tick tock, tick tock. Yes? Goal. All right. And that's what onboarding is all about. And we're going to learn today, not from books, but from horror stories and real life situations that, of course, none of you have experienced. So, here's a message from one of my favorite movies. Tell me if you know what it is. It's as good as it gets, right? And the onboarding process and the impression you make to your company and the people that you're hiring never gets any better than after they start. It starts with the recruiting process. So for example, if you're dating somebody, and let's say it's a man and a woman, and the man doesn't open the car door, he ain't going to do it after you get married. It's as good as it gets before. If you as an organization are late to meetings, if you don't respond timely to the candidates coming in, you're not going to get any better. Right now, 80+% of the people in the workforce today are ready to change jobs. And that there's a talent war out there. And if you don't treat them right, it's as good as it gets. You don't get a second chance. All right, 33%. Anyone know what that means? Within the first 30 days, they decide to stay or leave. %, expect to meet their coworkers the first day. Interesting. 89% want to meet their manager the first day. Does that always happen? Think about your onboarding experiences. Of course, they've all been great, right? 70% decide to stay or leave in the first 6 months. And 23% new hires turn over within 1 year. It's that first impression you make. It doesn't get any better. When you lose somebody, now there's different ranges of different studies, but when you lose somebody, the cost of turnover is between 1 and 3 times your annual compensation. That's a lot. When you add that up, that's a major impact on the bottom line. Now, on a positive note, you can improve the retention rate by 82% with the right onboarding process. You can improve the productivity of the employee. So the acculturation of the time an employee starts with the company to he or she can be productive can improve 82% more than somebody that doesn't go a good onboarding process. And if you do engagement surveys and client satisfaction surveys, you'll have a higher 20% rating of the manager. There's a book out called How Do You Work for a Jerk? It's all about working for somebody that isn't very good. People join companies, they leave bosses. The major silver bullet for improving employee engagement is you got to have strong middle management and strong supervision. So that's really critical. Oh. Is it Halloween yet? So I thought what I would do is scare the hell out of you. and share with you some horror stories, and these are all on the internet. And actually, one was spontaneous this morning by someone we're talking to who just experienced this horrible onboarding process. So let's get scared. So this person accepted the job via an email, didn't hear anything for 14 days. When HR followed up, they couldn't even remember who she was and when she was supposed to start. Gone. When the person came to the office, it was empty, no furniture, no computer. All she had was a box of tissues her first day. I won't tell you what she did with them. And the person arrived in the new job, and they walked in and they didn't know the person they were talking to was losing their job. What a way to find out, right? And the offer letter was made to somebody else. This never happens, right? This happens too often. Let's take a few more. Security wouldn't allow me to walk through the gates and kept the staff from coming in. They were all backed up behind them. How do you think she felt or he felt when they finally got through and they're all late for work? Or, due to red tape, I didn't have access to the system I needed to perform my job for 2 months.
Oh, wow.
Or, I thought I was going to get a drug test, I got a complete physical. True stories. They got my location wrong, they gave me the indirect start date, and they didn't send me any information regarding expectations, such as who to ask for, what time to get to, and where to bring me in. Or, I was really excited about my new role, transferred to a company with a new location. I was really off to a good start, but on day 2, I saw nobody. The difference between orientation and onboarding. The manager made a point of making sure he was there on my first day. He knew where I was sitting, and the boss started yelling at me to get condition report. Except, it was my first day at the newspaper. I didn't know what a condition report was. A major defense contractor hired somebody, had a temporary office. So what do they do with the temporary office? They put him in a conference room. And he was there with the computer for 2 weeks. And that's where he was. They left him alone. But he made good productivity out of it because he used it to find a job, searching on the internet. A new manager met me at the door, dropped me off at my desk without bothering to show me around or introduce me to anybody. I had to ask someone where to find the restroom. I didn't have minutes worth of training when he dropped me off. I felt like the George Costanza Penske file. Who watches Seinfeld? George Costanza. So, for those of you that haven't watched the episode, you got to Google this and watch it on YouTube. So George walks in for an interview, and the manager and the owner of the company says, "George, I'm really getting some good vibes with you. I think this is going to work." And he gets interrupted by his secretary to take a phone call, and he goes on vacation for 2 weeks. So George didn't get an answer. But knowing George says, "I'm going to get the job anyway. I'm going to show up on the job." So George goes and shows up on the job and says, "Hi, I'm George. Who are you?" "Oh, I'm the new manager." And then they said, "Well, what office do you want, the big one or the small one?" He says, "I'll take the small one, it's okay." So then he's in the office, doesn't know what to do, and the secretary comes in and said, "Here's the Penske file." He says, "Great." Of course, no clarity, no instructions, no anything. So he sits there and he says, "What do I know how to do?" About the only thing George knows how to do is put things in alphabetical order, right? So then he spends a week screwing around doing nothing. He's playing little drums with his pencils and everything. And then his boss returns as he's sleeping on the desk with the newspaper over his face. And his boss says, "What the hell's going on? What did you do with the Penske material? You're not Penske material. What did you do with the file?" And so what you don't know is Mr. Penske came to see George and really liked George and had to leave because his car was being towed. So when the boss said to George, "You're not Penske material," George says, "I quit. I'm going to go work for Mr. Penske." So what does he do? He goes to work for Mr. Penske, except when he shows up, Mr. Penske said, "You misunderstood me. I don't have a job for you. I just liked how you put things in alphabetical order. Our CEO's going to jail, and we're closing down the company. And by the way, your car is being towed too." So a lot of lessons here, right? The lessons are clarity, Make sure you understand, give clear directions, set expectations, all those things. So we're learning a lot about onboarding. So we're going to be giving a presentation at the Enterprise University on the employee life cycle that starts with what's your HR strategy, outreaching to the community, then you do recruiting, and then you do onboarding, and then you do development, engagement, performance management, offboarding, and alumni. Today we're going to talk about onboarding, but what you're going to find out is onboarding's at the beginning of this chain. It's like dominoes. And when you mess up here, the dominoes may not even fall all the way. A lot of people are going to leave right in the first 30, 60, 90 days. So there's a lot of clarity people ask about onboarding versus orientation. And the most important thing about onboarding, and the difference is, onboarding is about bringing a person into a company to make him or her productive in their job and department. Where orientation tells you about the company. It's more of a one-time event. It's important that in the onboarding process that the person has a good first impression, like we said, and it doesn't get any better. So why does onboarding help engagement? Just imagine if every employee came to work every day, excited about their job, motivated, they acted and thought like an owner. Wouldn't that be great? Well, why don't they do that? Do we hire disengaged people? No. Something happens, and it usually starts in the recruiting process, and if it doesn't get caught there, then you tick people off in the onboarding process. Two definitions of engagement, one's by Forbes. It's the emotional commitment an employee has to an organization and its goals, resulting in the use of discretionary time, not being told what to do, but on an employee's discretionary time, they spend it thinking about improving the company. Or by a company here in St. Louis, fifth generation, Lippick's Engagement, it's when employees feel passionate about their job and committed to their job, not just with words, but with actions. And if you take a look at a survey across 150,000 workers, only about 30% of the organizations are fully engaged. 52% are disengaged, and 18% are actively engaged. More than half the organization is not where you want them to be. And how does that impact? Highly engaged people can impact quality more, they can reduce costs more, and they can improve customer service more. So there's a direct correlation for those companies that say, I don't want to spend money improving my employees and making them more engaged, it's costing them money in the bottom line. How many people have read the book, First Break All the Rules? If you haven't read the book, go out and Google it, and you'll find these 12 questions. By Gallup, these are the 12 questions you see in employee engagement surveys. These are the 12 questions that determine how well an employee is engaged. So when we do employee engagement surveys, these are the questions that are asked. And they're pretty basic. Do I know what's expected of me at work? Do I have the tools, materials to do my job? Do I have the opportunities to do best every day? Do I receive feedback? It's basic project management 101. Does someone encourage me at my work? Do my opinions count? So this is the engagement gap. If you look on the left, you start the recruiting process. And people are motivated, right? They're motivated to work for your company. They're motivated to start a new job. And then on day one, or even before day one, if you're not doing the best you can, as good as it gets, if you're not making the right first impression, if you're not communicating well, if you're not engaging them, if you're not caring, and they don't get a sense that they're important, all of a sudden that line goes down. You got lower productivity, higher turnover, and higher absenteeism. But if you do it right, it goes up. And all those benefits we talked about higher service, higher productivity, higher quality, that's the engagement gap, if they're around 2 years. Your best employees are going to leave, but the mediocre ones or less are going to stay, and that's what you're going to be dealing with. So let's look at an onboarding process. This is a typical process. You make an offer, they come to your company, they start in day one, you give an orientation, and then you have an onboarding life cycle that could be anywhere from 30, 60, 90 days up to maybe 6 months or sometimes longer. What we encourage, and you have one in front of you, and Sarah is the author of this, we encourage every company to do a process flow of your onboarding process. Look at all the different functions that are involved in that onboarding process. You have HR, you have the hiring manager, you have legal, you have all the different organizations, internal organizations and external. So this is a real live example of a company where we did an onboarding process, and they use this to train people. It's a much better visual tool to use a flow chart than it is to use a checklist. Now the second thing that happens is, okay, I got a flow chart, how do I really map this out? So also in front of you, you have a chart that looks like this. And it's a project plan. And it says every step on that flow chart, like step 3 says send employee documentation, it lists all the documentation. So if you're not using software that we'll talk about in a second that does all this for you, you need to build a project plan to support your onboarding process so things don't get lost. There's a lot of moving parts. Unless you put them in a chart with accountability, it's not going to happen very well. And you can see there's a whole lot of steps that have to be done over a 90-day period. So why do onboarding processes fail? You heard all the horror stories. Let's talk about a few others. After someone accepts an offer, there's no contact. Does it ever happen? Or they're not prepared for the first day. People come in, they don't feel they're important because there's no celebration. They're being buried in so much information, they don't know what's important or what's not important. They don't get the right technical support. One of the number one things that people complain about is they don't get their computer, their security codes, and access to the internet and the printers in the first week or the first month. That's a major problem. They don't get a lot of guidance. They don't clarify expectations. Remember the Penske file? Here's the Penske file. What do I do with it? And they don't extend the time frame beyond 90 days. Depending on the job, that onboarding process could be a year, especially the higher up you go. There's no metrics or accountability. If you're not keeping score, you're only practicing, so you have to keep score on how well you're doing. And one size doesn't fit all. By a show of hands, is there a difference between hiring millennials or baby boomers? Do they need any different care? It's like hiring dogs and cats, right? Different. So you have to make sure you're tailoring your onboarding process to the right audience. The manager's missing in action. Remember, 83% said they want to see the manager the first day. There's a delays in onboarding. Someone shows up, but nothing happens for a week, a few days. There's no onboarding plan. Everyone thinks HR owns onboarding. Is that right? Who's accountable for onboarding? Is it HR? No, there's a whole team. And if the team is unorganized, it's like playing football or baseball without a game plan and everyone's going different directions. Best practices in onboarding: make the investment, do it right up front, tailor to meet individual needs, reach out to new hires before their start date, define measures of success, make the first day memorable, develop a tight structured plan where people know what they need to do and be accountable, cross-functional teams, try to get the paperwork done as early as possible and make it paperless as much as possible, assign a buddy or a mentor the first 30 days, set expectations early and provide feedback often, get feedback from the new hires on how well the onboarding process is going. Don't expect them to hit the ground running. I hate that phrase, but people use it all the time. When someone starts the first day, don't say, here's the Penske file and expect them to do something unless you let them know. Communicate culture. Culture trumps everything. One of the main reasons why people join and leave companies is because of culture. And also paint a picture of the future. Just don't look at the next year. Let someone know that they have a career with the company, and then leverage technology and software and videos. Everyone does that, right? In the book, The First 90 Days, which are the most critical, what you want to do is you want to find out where's the break-even point. So the first 3 months, an employee is costing you money. It's costing you time, it's costing you energy, you spent money bringing the person in, relocation, training. But then after 3 months, if they're properly acculturated in the organization and they're properly brought in with training, they start creating value. They have ideas, they get things done, their productivity's there. And so at the end of 6 months, it's like a break even. The better your onboarding process, you can shorten that value consumed and start producing higher. So for those organizations with accountants and want to run numbers, this is the kind of stuff you show them. 90-day plans. If you're in a company and you don't have an if you join a company and you don't have an onboarding process, develop your 90-day plan. Sit down with your boss and tell him or her what you'd like to do for the next 90 days and work out that plan together. If they also have an onboarding process, what's your 90-day plan? Not just so much for the onboarding, but what's your 90-day plan to break even or get more productive faster than 3 months? What are you going to do? Don't wait to be told. So 90-day plan is a great tool. Videos, I'm going to ask Sam to talk, but videos can be used as a welcoming. There's nothing better than having a sign with the person's name on it or a video saying welcome, orientation. Rather than have a 2 or 3 hour orientation or 4-hour orientation, you can have snippets on video that you can watch both in person with a group of people and by yourself. You can have the employee handbook in segments that you can look on your phone, on your iPad or your computer, online training with videos, videos that tell stories, not horror stories, but good stories. Videos increase engagement because people like to watch, and videos are more cost effective. But don't make the mistake of leveraging videos in the next slide, which is technology, not to make onboarding personable, because the personal touch is really important.
All right, I'm just going to throw in a couple of examples of what some of the people that we're working with are using video to improve the onboarding process. It's kind of interesting. One of the first onboarding or orientation videos that we did for a client was, guess what type of business it was? Nobody in this room is going to be able to guess what type of business.
Video production.
No, but good guess. No, the St. Louis County Jail. They have a very strong inmate orientation process because they want things to run smoothly. And if you think about it, people kind of chuckle when I talk about the fact that we did the inmate orientation video, especially when they find out that I played a cameo role in it. I was inmate female worker number 3. But it makes sense, because if you need things to run smoothly, if you want people to understand what are the rules, they can't follow the rules if they don't understand what they are. So since then, we've seen companies use onboarding video for a couple of different things. One is just kind of general welcome and onboarding, and that is your mission, vision, values, welcome from the CEO message, what to expect on your first day. You're coming into work. Do you bring a lunch? What time should you be there? What do you expect? How are you supposed to dress? These can actually be sent out to the new employee before their first day of work. So at home, they feel more prepared, they feel more welcome, and they're ready to hit the ground running. We've also have people that do onboarding not just on a company level, but on a department level and on a project level. So like, for example, one of our customers, Charter Spectrum, they do department onboarding. So we actually say for the IT department, for a new employee, these are all of the systems that we use, and this is how the general public uses them as a whole. When somebody orders Charter Cable, these are all of the systems that they go through that you're going to be working on, that you're going to be involved in. And so they learn what the department does and how their job plays a role in the overall organization. Spire Energy, for example, did onboarding and training videos for a project. They're doing a pipeline project. And they had us do onboarding videos for the project because they've got all of these people and they wanted to share with them the scope of the project, what the expectations are, safety information. I learned more about timber rattlesnakes and bats and other endangered species working on this video because those are things that people working on the pipeline project need to know. So people are using video for onboarding for the company, for the project, and for the department. And then we've also been working with people on knowledge capture and transfer. You're all familiar with knowledge transfer. A lot of companies do like lunch and learns and things like that. They look good on paper when you have to do your annual risk assessment, but in reality, they don't work very well. Companies now are actually capturing people's expertise and critical systems on video so that they can share them with all employees and they can use them as onboarding. When new employees come in, they can watch videos. They don't have to catch what the person is saying during that one meeting. They can go back and watch it over and over again or as they need information when it's appropriate. So a lot of people are doing things like that now to help with the onboarding process.
The other good thing about videos is that for people that are out of town, they can't come into the office, you can't see people with that company until they relocate, videos are a great source. Also technology. How many people use technology software that has workflow, online forms? So this makes it a lot easier. The more paper you have, the less productive you're going to be. but the software does reminders in case people forget. It sends workflows on your tasks when you build a project plan. It does all these things. It also could have a portal, so whether it's in SharePoint, Office 365, Google Docs, whatever, you can have all the documentation, not just for the company to look at, but the employee can find out where he or she is on it as well. So how do you measure? Remember, if you're not keeping score, you're only practicing. Here's some typical measures you would use for the onboarding process, but then I also want to show you some measures for right first-time hires. I can measure my turnover rate for the first 6 months. How many people did I hire? How many people left within 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? I could do a feedback survey. How well did the process go? How well did we communicate? Cycle time. How long did it take? How many hours of effort? You can reduce the manual effort and cycle time. Number of errors and issues. You know, a person shows up without a computer. A person shows up without an office. All those things, you give the person the wrong name, the wrong offer letter. And then all the internal lessons learned. So are you creating improvement in your process? And then how many people know what the Net Promoter Score is? So the Net Promoter Score asks these questions. How likely are you to recommend somebody to work for this company? How likely are you to recommend somebody to buy the products or services for this company? And from an employee engagement perspective, how likely are you to recommend somebody to work for your boss? Ooh, that's a hard one. But if you want to look at right first time hire measures, what's the turnover rate by year? So not just what's our retention and turnover rate, but do it by year. Because you know the cost is 1 to 3 times compensation. That gets pretty expensive. And what's my tenure by hiring year? I hired 10 people this year, 10 people next year. What's my retention by year? What's my engagement score by year? What's their performance ratings? Of the people that I've hired, how well they performed, how many are on performance improvement plans, how many have had promotions, and again, Net Promoter Score. Do you keep track of all these measures? Start doing it. It's like playing baseball without keeping score. So, in front of you is a list of start, stop, and continue. What I want you to do after a second is think about 3 things from what you learned today you should start doing to improve your onboarding process, 3 things you should stop doing so you can reallocate to start doing, and what you're doing well you should continue doing. But before you do that, we do have a question. The question is, what's the cost of not doing onboarding right? If you get any flack from your CFO where they say, we don't have the money to spend, we don't have the time, we don't have the resources, the cost of not doing it right is really expensive. That's the question. When someone says we can't afford it, you can't afford not to do it. So how many people are advocates of onboarding? All right. So, the magic of onboarding. I will illustrate the magic of onboarding. There are 52 different things you could do with the onboarding process. But what's important is that of these 52 different things, there are a few that are really important. So would you pick out one of the important ones, please? Ooh, I think she got it. And we're going to come over here. And we'll have you pick one. And you pick one. Okay? Now everyone look at, you can show everybody. Okay? It's okay if I see it, I know what they are anyway. So did you put yours in the deck? Now, what's going to happen is we're going to have 52 different things, but we have to find these 3 things. These are the most important things. So I'm going to place them in the glass, and I'd like for each of you to think about what's the most important thing. Because something, if you look at the glass, oh wait, is this yours?
No.
Oh wait, this is yours. This was the most important. Now make sure there's no ghosts or goblins in the glass. Go ahead. Remember the horror stories.
Just start.
All right, now it's between the 2 of you to concentrate. Concentrate to see which one. This must be you, Vicki.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true? We're going to do yours backwards. because yours is going to be the hardest thing to look at right here. Was yours the 4 diamonds? What was it? Well, if you do it right, you can turn the 4 diamonds into the Jack of Clubs. So give them a round of applause. Did I leave you out? You didn't get a card, did you? Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to do this. We're going to make you do a little bit harder, okay? Tell you what, are all the cards different?
Appears so.
Okay. You have to pick the number one thing in onboarding, all right?
Okay.
Say stop. Here, take it and show everybody. Everyone see it? You see it? Shuffle the deck. Are you playing with the full deck?
Depends on the day.
All right, concentrate on your card. I will think what your card is. Actually, I will draw a picture of your card. I have a deck of cards here. And your card's in here. Concentrate on your card. Now, it could be
That is the card.
this really your card?
It is.
Then let me, little couple quotes here, and I'll put my name. Thank you. All right, so that's the magic of onboarding. Take a minute and write down one thing on those 3 columns. You can do more later, and let's see what you come up with.
Does anybody need a pen?
What's one thing you'd like to do in onboarding differently from today? Or even harder, what's one thing you'd like to stop doing? So you can reallocate the time and energy to start doing. And then we'll have maybe 1 or 2 people share. So we don't want you to be a horror story. We don't want anyone working for your companies to be on our next presentation. I see people writing. I see a lot of start doings, a couple of stop doings. So a lot of companies use form letters, they forget to change company names or people's names. All right, we have time for just a couple sharing. Who would like to share one start or stop doing? Anybody? Yes?
Stop making excuses as to why we can't make time for onboarding.
Right. You got to do it right the first time because you are an advocate, right?
That's right.
All right, somebody else?
When first start doing, make sure the new hire has all the necessary tools on the first day.
Right.
Something we
No Penske file,
not
right?
good at.
Anybody in the first row?
I just had standardized knowledge transfer,
Good.
start doing.
So take these forms back with you, take these handouts of process flows, but thank you for your time and energy, and go push onboarding. Thank you very much.